On this episode of AV Week, we talk about the New York Digital Signage Week, NSCA's brand new technical assessment tool, and TV One has a new female CEO. All that and more next on AV Week.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
AV Week is brought to you by our fine group of underwriters, companies like HD Base T. This is AV Week, episode 220, recorded Friday, November 6th, 2015. Testing 1, 2, 3.
Ready.
AV Week.
Performing scan.
Week.
Online.
This is AV Week. AV Week. This is AV Week, your weekly wrap-up of audio-visual news and information. My name is Tim Albright. I am your host. With us this week from Nashville, Tennessee, weighing in at probably 105 pounds soaking wet, Mr. Phil Cordell, also known as High Five from M3 Technology. How are you, sir?
Great, glad to be here. Just reached my personal goal of 115. Thank you,
Good.
Tim.
Very good.
Pretty exciting.
I was going to do a whole Andy Kaufman like wrestling thing, but I'm not going to because I'm not going to say how much I weigh. And neither am I going to say how much Chris Netto weighs because we hung out in New York and I know how much sushi we put down on Monday. Chris Netto from AV Help Desk, how are you, sir?
I'm doing good. Glad to see that Phil has moved up from featherweight to welterweight.
Is it bantamweight? 115.
Bantamweight. That's it.
He and Ronda Rousey are going round and round next week. So
I would not fight her.
Neither would I.
I would not fight her either. She'd kick my ass. Somebody else could kick my ass is Melissa Dillman. How are you? Did you see what I did there?
I was wondering how you're going to segue that, Tim. I'm doing great. How are you guys?
I am doing well. She's, of course, from Kramer, trainer extraordinaire. I actually get to hang out with her a couple weeks at the AQAV event in Champaign, Illinois, home of the Fighting Illini. So I kind of half mentioned the fact that Chris and I got to hang out this week in New York. We got to do a couple things for New York Digital Signage Week. If you're interested in that and in what we did a live broadcast from the Daktronics studios in Times Square, no less. Holy cow.
You have to say that with Times frickin' Square.
Times frickin' Square. It was really neat. It really was. And the shot was really cool. Just ignore the fat guy in the middle in the suit and look at, all the really cool digital signage that's going on. We'll talk about it here in a second, but go to our YouTube page or the website where we'll have a link to the YouTube page, but that really is where all the cool stuff is. We got to talk with Daktronics, Digital Signage Federation, Show and Tell, our friend Adrian Cottrell from Daily Do. So yeah, check that out if you would, please. All right, hey, let's get this show on the road. You know what? Let's just kick it off with Digital Signage Week. Chris, I asked you this on the program. I'll ask you this again. We're AV folks, right? Now, lots of smart folks, lots of smart people have written about digital signage in this space and integrators in this space getting involved in digital signage. Talked to Jim at Daktronics about how integrators can get involved with them, specifically because sometimes they're listed almost as the AV general contractor, and how integrators can partner with them. Not for nothing, but why were we there? Why were we at Digital Signage Week this week?
I've often asked that same question to myself. What were we doing? What were we doing on Times Square? Why were you, the representative of Midwest America, sitting there having coffee with a big LED board behind you and a great picture, I might add? What were we doing there is very simple. The digital signage world in our world of corporate AV or commercial AV has pretty much been relegated to the TV in the box, and that's pretty much where we've left it. I think there's curiosity on our part as AVNation to dig deeper. I mean, we've had discussions regarding the scoreboard at Wrigley Field. We've had conversations about, I mentioned on the program, the ooh and ah and the wow. I mean, what me and you do, Tim, on a daily basis of working in conference rooms doesn't get a lot of oohs and ahs. But, man, you walk down Times Square, that is just a big old advertisement, not just for, obviously, the companies that purchase these mega LED boards, but it's a very good representation of AV and what we can do as an industry. I mean, a lot of that stuff wasn't possible. It wasn't as wow as it is now, put it to you that way. Back in the days of the Jumbotrons, you were limited in the size and the capacity, and, you'd have the bezels and all that sort of stuff that were blocking these things from getting bigger. Man, these things are looking more and more seamless, and we were up close to a lot of them, being up a couple floors and right in the face of some of them. You could see on our video, we're getting a suntan from just about every angle in that space. But there is a purpose for us being there in the sense that it is our people that are working installing those things on the back end. We're still working with manufacturers. The mount manufacturers are still building the frames for these LED boards to be put up. You're still talking about people who are putting together the video processors to make this thing all work, and the seamless switching and all that. But one of the things that came out loud and clear from me sitting there this past week is no matter what we do, no matter how big and pretty and how we mount this stupid thing and get it up there fixed, none of it matters unless you have the right content going.
Yeah. And
that is the big draw. It has to be the content. And no better example of content than when you're looking at a 60, 70 foot long board, that says that's rolling a PowerPoint presentation. Because typically that's what we would be telling our customers to do. Put a couple PowerPoint slides up.
Well, and that was the other thing is we talked with Stephanie from Show and Tell, who actually came from Daktronics originally as a content creator and content manager. And one of the interesting points that she made was you can't just take a 30-second commercial and slap it up on a digital signage. It just doesn't work, right? The medium is different. Who you're talking to is different. How you're talking to them is different. Let's start with the most obvious thing of there's no speakers, right? And I mean, and what's interesting is, so if you're familiar with Times Square, and again, I am the typical big dumb Midwesterner. I think I've been to New York twice in my life. Both of them have been this year. You're standing and you're looking at where the ball drops on the right-hand side, like literally right there. There's the New York Police Department substation right there. On the right-hand side, there is a Hard Rock Cafe. We were like 2 or 3 stories above the Hard Rock Cafe right there. So we're literally like right across the street from the Revline sign, from H&M, from a lot. After our conversation with the folks at Daktronics and Show and Tell and everybody, I'm walking down Times Square, the street, and there's this big giant M&M shop, right across the street from Hershey's. And what are they doing?
M&M World.
They're showing stinking commercials on their freaking digital signage. They're doing exactly what she said not to do. Now you've seen them enough that you can imagine the voices in your head. At least I can. But it's exactly what she's saying not to do. And then you're looking at the other ones, like the Toys R Us one, which is not trying to talk to you without speakers. They're doing a very good job of communicating their message with visuals and with graphics and with CG and stuff. So, Phil, as an integrator, as somebody who may or may not have trying to get into your stuff personally, but as an integrator, how do you handle projects? Maybe not like Times Square, but let's be honest, Nashville has their own set of what's it called, the Music Mile, where you guys have got a lot of not as much as Times Square, but you have a fair amount of digital signage in the city. Either that, or when you're talking about wayfinding in education or mass notification in education, how do you guys manage some of these projects? Very interesting, Phil. It's incredibly interesting. I have no idea what you're saying.
You see, that's effective digital signage content, where you feel what I'm saying, but you can't hear it. I find ASL to be highly effective interpretive dance.
Very nice.
Effective
Very
for
well
content.
done, ASL.
Thanks. So yeah, we know that digital signage is one of those kind of tangential industries to our own, that it's so close to what we do that we do it sometimes, but I also know that there are other companies that that's their thing, that's all they do. And they're better at it, I think, than your average integrator, as anybody is that focuses as opposed to trying to do a little bit of everything. The approach we've taken is trying to hone in on a couple products or a couple manufacturers to partner with, so that when somebody says, hey, do you guys do digital signage, we say, well, this is typically what we do. We've got some carousel stuff, some tightrope, or maybe there was a planar solution we were using for a while that people really liked. It was simple, easy to use. And so we're trying to get into it a little bit more and more, but we've got account managers that work here at M3 that go to Digital Signage Expo every year, and we know that there's this huge industry that we're just scratching the surface of as AV integrators. When you get into content creation, I mean, we could hire a guy, out of school with a graphic design background and have him making content, 40 hours a week for us, and probably pursue that as a business model. But we haven't, because, that's kind of a big leap to make without having the business in the bag,
Is that something then that you subcontract out then? Is the content, or you let the client do it?
Yeah, typically we kind of train the client so that they can do it themselves. Now, there's the interactive wayfinding that you mentioned. We've partnered with 4 Winds on some projects at some universities around the state on that stuff. But again, the people that are good at content, that's practically all they do. They're not measuring for sound pressure levels. They're not doing all the other stuff that we do as AV integrators. They're doing digital signage. They're doing content creation.
Well, and here's not to be silly, but they also understand the pixel density and the graphical limitations of these things, right? I mean, yes, you and I could do the math and say, okay, you know what, we have X amount of pixels in this specific installation. I'm being careful about how I'm saying this, because it's not just a 16:9 screen you're throwing up there, right? Each one of these is unique. Each one of these is different, because you can do so many interesting and unique things with them.
Definitely. If I can't design it on my Albright, then I'm not interested.
Wow. Mm-hmm. ASL and Albright, all from the same guy. Okay. Melissa, from a manufacturer standpoint,
Wow.
how are you going to follow that up? How do you keep on top of all this stuff? One of the things that we talked about with both Daktronics and also Atrium Control was the resolution issues, right? As each of these boards are getting refreshed out, depending on where they are in the cycle, the next iteration of these will probably start pushing 4 or 8K. That means that the video processing is going to have to handle that, and the topology is going to have to handle that, and the carriers are going to have to handle that. And I'm, again, trying to be careful, because I'm not going to say the cabling, I'm not going to say the fiber. However they're getting that signal there is going to have to handle XK, right? How do you guys stay on top of that stuff?
Well, you have really intelligent folks that sit in a closet somewhere, and that's all they do, right, is they figure this out. Dr. Kramer, by far and away, the stuff, you would just love to go be a fly on the wall in his office, because he's constantly dreaming stuff up. So, I think that's for the engineers and the guys who are creating all this technology. But I think for digital signage as an AV industry, I think we have just scratched the surface. There's a lot of opportunity coming to these guys in the very near future, especially with IoT and the whole marketing aspects. So I think it's a pretty exciting time. And if I were looking for some verticals, I'd probably be looking at digital signage and how I could have an impact there.
Now, real quickly, you mentioned IoT. And I'll be the first to admit I understand enough to be dangerous about Internet of Things, mainly because I have a Nest. That's about the extent of my knowledge. Explain how IoT impacts digital signage for people who don't fully grasp that.
So I was watching, just to refresh myself, I watched Minority Report again, a classic, right?
Yes.
And what do they have? You walk into a store, and on the display, the lady greets you. Hello there, Tim. How are you? Are you looking for a sweater to go with those pants you purchased last week? Right?
Yep.
That is so IoT. I mean, the environmental chips that are in our phones, all of the data that is being passed around, the wearables, all of that is going to start communicating, and advertisers and marketing are certainly the huge drivers of this. So that's where I think it comes into play. The environmental chips now, if it senses that I am in a room that is too hot or humid, it's going to start pumping me information about air conditioners and cooling and things of that might be of interest. So I think we're sitting on the edge of something that's going to be really big in the near future.
All right,
people won't get on par with it.
Let me take this to a side real quick, and then we'll get off the whole digital signage thing. And Melissa, I'm going to start with you, and you guys can jump in with your opinions. One of the events this week for New York Digital Signage Week was a breakfast. It was coffee and controversy with DSF, Digital Signage Federation. And it was neat. They had 4 panelists up there, plus Ken from the head of DSF. One of the questions was about that very thing and whether or not it should be push or pull, right? Pull, sorry, not pool, like billiards, but pull. And I'm going to start with you, Melissa, and then ask you guys can jump in again. What do you think it should be? Whether it's from a privacy standpoint, an advertiser standpoint, a manufacturer standpoint, whatever stance you want to take, should it be push where these things are pushing things to our devices to give us those types of information, or should it be pull where we're like, hey, you know what, I would like that, and if I don't see I want it, then don't give it to me?
That's an excellent point, but I'm afraid that Pandora's box has already been opened.
So it's going to be pushed regardless.
Yeah, I think we have no choice. Okay. Let's face it. The money's in the advertising. It's in the data collection, and we've already signed our rights away to that. I don't see a way that we're going to be able to put it all back in the box. So I think whether we like it or not, it's going to invade our privacy. And I just read a really interesting article that said the future of privacy has a price, and only the rich will be able to afford it.
Interesting.
That's an interesting concept.
Yeah.
So do I have to start paying now so that I don't get bombarded?
Well, YouTube. I mean, let's take YouTube Red, for example. I mean, YouTube just released the ability to watch videos without ads. This network, I mean, let's be frank about this. I mean, our network, we have underwriters. There's a reason that we use that word. Kramer is one of our underwriters. We don't have ads. We don't have, anything like that. We have a group of underwriters, people who find value in what we do, that pay for the ability for us to go to DSF, for us to go to ISC, to go to Infocom and cover these events for you, the people who listen, so yeah, there is a price to be paid for privacy. You've got a very good point there. All right, we were going to talk about Barco real quick. Chris, we're probably going to jump on something else here. From AV Network, avnetwork.com, the people who give you it's new base, so the people who give you like SCN and AV Technology and actually Digital Signage magazine. TV One has named
Denise.
Well, Denise, sorry. It took me a second. I lost my place in the article. Denise as CEO. I'm going to say Nimchev is how I'm going to pronounce her last name. As the first female head of TV One. Melissa, I am going to start with you, and the other 3 of us yahoos are probably not going to talk about this at all. As a woman in AV, and this is a subject that we've talked about a lot over the last 3 or 4 years, how important is this position and this naming of Denise as the new TV One CEO?
I think that it's important based on what she does with it. There's obviously, we've got presidents, owners, we have some high-level executives, right? Take a look at Corey Schaefer and Jan at FSR. those women are powerhouses in the industry, and they go out of their way to give back to women in the industry. So the question is, I'm not, I have not met her, but it would be my hope that she reaches out to the women in the industry and helps, mentor and guide and speak up. I think it's exciting that they appointed a woman into the position.
All right. Now let me, I guess, not take issue, but give you kind of a counterpoint to that. Jan Sandry, great woman in AV. Mm-hmm. Corey Schaefer, great woman in AV. Matter of fact, Corey's going to be on AVWeek next week. Both of them started their companies, though, right?
Well, Russ Gentner started the company.
Well,
Corey worked with him
Corey
closely.
Worked with him, yeah. That's why I think this is a little bit more significant, right, than Jan Sandry, right? There's FSR. The S in FSR is Jan, right? So that's why I think this is kind of even more significant than that, by the fact that it's not someone who was involved in the founding, not someone who was involved in that, where they're taking someone who they see value in and they see the ability to do this. Or am I just not reading that right?
Well, let's look at it this way. This Denise is, obviously heading up TV1. That's awesome. Well placed in our industry. Her background, though, she comes from Stanley and Black & Decker, which is a little more far removed from our industry. So I would be curious as to how she kind of found her way into the industry. I mean, look at us. We all know how we ended up here. But, moving from Black & Decker into AV, that's an interesting trip there to take. So
you can't rule out, maybe she was a musician, maybe she was a roadie at some
maybe
point.
she was a roadie.
You never know.
She's a thespian,
you never know. Maybe she was a DJ.
Yeah.
Well, that's why I mean, I'm not being facetious. I would kind of like to know how she kind of found her way here, because the rest of us followed the old guys.
Well, speaking for yourself, I followed the young guys, so. All right. Moving on. Our old friends at Biamp have an interesting thing to add to Tessera and its amplifiers. Now, before you go to sleep and say, yay, amplifiers, let's talk about this for a second. Here's the thing with Tessera, and if you're not familiar with Tessera is their AVB, is their next generation of processors, right? It's also the one that gives, in my mind, the biggest chance for TSN/AVB. Could totally be wrong about this. Who knows? We'll find out in probably a year. But in my mind, and the way that they've kind of positioned this product and they've rolled out this product, it is at least there. Phil, when it comes to this whole networked AV thing, right, is putting something like an amplifier in that line where you can, and I'm not saying that you can do that with this one, but again, I'm forecasting here, and I guess I'm pushing my own wishes on Biamp, and if anybody's listening from Biamp, you should do this. Putting something in there where it allows you to take networked AV straight into an amplifier, right? Crown already has that with the very first TSN certified product. The fact that Biamp is coming out with that and making it work well with their existing stuff, does that make sense, or should we leave amplifiers alone in the analog world?
No, I absolutely agree with you, man. That's just the next logical step in our audio progression. I know it makes people feel funny that they don't have analog ins and outs, and these products, the specs you can put in, they're the same cards that you'd use in their X mods, and that's cool. I'm a fan. I love. We sell a boatload of Biamp. We love the Nexia, love the Audia, and big fans of the Tessera product family as well. So I'm really stoked to see how the amps sound, and I expect them to sound good just because we're used to pretty high quality products coming out of Biamp, coming out of Beaverton. So you can mark me down in the category of big fan, hoping it works out great.
All right. Chris, the other side of this is something that I've written about numerous times, and that's giving one manufacturer all of your money when it comes to a product or when it comes to a project. Does the fact that they're going down this, I shouldn't say going down this amplifier line. Let's be clear. Biamp has had amplifiers for a number of years. This is just the Tessera brand of amplifiers. Does this make sense? Keeping, I guess, all of your audio all the way down, at least until you get to the speakers in one company?
Absolutely. It's one, for lack of a better, better term, there's one person to choke if something goes wrong.
I hate that phrase. I hate that phrase.
Yeah, I know you do. It's not accepted in the Midwest, but in here in the East Coast,
it's not just my sensibilities.
How you like that?
Yeah.
All right. So wow. you have that. Hey, if it's wrong here, don't blame it on the next thing, because I don't know about you guys, but when I get on the phone with tech support, and the first question out of their mouth is, all right, you got our product, what is it connected to? And you make the fatal flaw of saying, oh, I have X and it's connected into brand Y. Ooh, you can hear the freaking train come to a complete halt, because it seems as if they flip open, okay, hold on, let's go to the other chapter of our book, and they turn that over. Yeah, you better call that other guy too.
Well, no, that is the other chapter. You have to call the other person.
Now you have pretty much just wiped out your schedule for the entire day. That install comes to a halt as you now go sit and play the referee between two manufacturers who are now trying to finger point each other. So yeah, if you are going to ask me what I would do, I have to play that role of, do I put all my eggs in one basket, or do I go with the varied stuff? And if something goes wrong, I'm going to be on the phone all day. I'm going to be angry, and somebody better buy me dinner, because this is going to be, I'm packing a lunch and a freaking sleeping bag, because it's going to be an all-day event. So, yeah, man, I have no problem with putting it all into one, if I have an answer for everything. Don't blame the other guy. And especially when you start dealing with the network technology. I'm sure everybody here can vouch for it, that when we started in the early days of IP transporting of signal, whether it's video or audio, there was a lot of questions that were brought up regarding, you have to use the right cable, you have to use the right terminators, you have to use our connectors, not their connectors, you have to do this, you have to do that. By the time you were done, you were the problem. It wasn't the gear. Open a window, jump out, dude, you're done. It's not happening. So put them all in one basket. Go with the company that's doing the whole thing, and at least you get an answer, because there's nobody else to blame until they tell you that you should be using different type of cable. And then you're back to ground zero.
or your termination's wrong. Did you tone that out? All right, Ms. Dillman, I'm going to ask you a different angle of this question. As a manufacturer, and let's be fair to Melissa. Melissa's a trainer. She's not, a Uber vice president from Kramer in Israel. She's a trainer, so let's at least be fair that way. But she's still a manufacturer, so I can ask this question. How does it feel, or how does it work inside when, let's say, somebody that you have done business with, where you've partnered with, right? Kramer makes video products. They make some control systems. They do some video stuff, and let's say that, I don't know, you've partnered with a display manufacturer, right? I'm making this up. At least I think I am. And suddenly that display manufacturer says, hey, by the way, we have a great video processor over here too. Yes, you should still use Kramer's, but we have one too. Does that, I guess the best way to ask this is, how does that impact the relationship of these cross-company collaborations?
Well, I think, for the most part, you don't partner with someone who has a competitive product, for the most part, if it's in direct competition, and if it's a big enough competition, you buy them. But, to Chris's point, on this side of the table as a manufacturer, when you call tech support and you tell me that you've connected my product and it's one of 500 different products and manufacturers connected together, we do the same thing. We go, oh, let's go get our lunch, let's open the next chapter, right? Because surprisingly, manufacturers don't really like to share their technologies, and and there's special sauces with us to tell us, how we can make them all work together. So while it's frustrating on both sides of the table to get that kind of news, because it's really tough for us to troubleshoot someone else's gear.
Yeah.
As if you call me and it's my gear, one of the techs can throw it on a bench and we can see if we can replicate it. So I think that's sort of a two-way street.
Yeah, it is. And it's also...
On a positive, Tim.
What?
On a positive, the end user becomes very smart and fluent in every possible technology or every different manufacturer's terms and technology, because you're literally there in between trying to figure out how this works. And you're reverse engineering it, basically.
Well, and here's the thing. This is why programmers are the most important person in your lineup.
Oh my God! And that ad was sold by and provided by Tim Albright.
This is coming from a former programmer. I'm joking. They are the people though that makes everything talk to each other. I'm just saying. Just saying.
Allegedly.
No,
allegedly
eventually. Not allegedly. Eventually it'll work.
Eventually.
Day 2.
Undoubtedly.
Day 2.
Why don't we just keep throwing out some freaking adjectives into this one, or adverbs, or whatever the hell you want? I failed that class.
You're from Jersey. I know. All right. Last but not least,
I'm cleaning it up.
NSCA unveils a technical assessment tool. This is very interesting. From our friends over at NSCA.org, quote unquote, the National Systems Contractors Association is excited to announce the release of a new online tool that saves time, streamlines hiring, identifies current employees with extraordinary technical skills, and finds the best new candidates, the technical assessment tool. So, a couple of things with this. First, it's interesting, right? I like the idea. I applaud the idea of trying to get the best qualified candidate. Some issues that I kind of have is sometimes your green people are going to be green, and they're probably not going to pass this assessment tool, right? Whether it's getting folks from ITT Technical Institute or another trade organization here in St. Louis, we have ITT Tech, we have Vatterott Technical College. Again, these are for-profit technical colleges. You can get an associate's and I believe a bachelor's in electrical engineering. Or obviously we have SLU and Southern Illinois University and all these other great colleges around here. But they're not AV colleges, right? This is a bigger conversation that we've had. There is no such thing as an AV college. Yes, there's one or two programs throughout the country. Don't email me. But for the most part, there's not, this grand degree on a giant scale. Like, Duke doesn't have one. Harvard doesn't have one. Notre Dame doesn't have one that I'm aware of. So, Chris, when it comes to this, and we have a lot of friends that have gone through a couple of these different programs, how important or how valuable, I guess, is this tool going to be for those green folks? For the ones existing, I can kind of see it, but for those green boys and girls that are coming out of high school, coming out of technical colleges, and they're just getting started in the industry, how is this going to work?
I don't like the be-all, end-all question or the be-all, end-all answer to it. I think it's a start. But why don't we give them maybe some hands-on things? I think that would be helpful. Can you identify what this is? Type of thing. When I started this in this industry in '98, somebody showed me a BNC cable, and I referred to it as a BNC cable. And they responded with, "You're hired." That's awesome. My degree didn't matter for nothing. As soon as I figured out that was BNC, they're like, "Dude, you're here. You're one of us. Let's go."
That test had one question.
Pretty much, I think they killed the question after they showed me the BNC cable because nobody else before me knew what it was. So I broke the test. It's kind of good.
Well, and
you can come with the practical exams and the first layer stuff. I mean, not to dredge up a conversation that's all over the internet now regarding CTS. But the CTS was that initial test. It wasn't something you were going to give to an employee walking in. But the first level CTS was you understand what you're doing. You understand what we're talking about in our industry, and it was your benchmark. You pass that, you go through. I've taken some, I've done interviews early on in my career where they ask you those questions and those, things about what is BNC, what is RGBH, what does it stand for at the time. That sort of stuff was common sense, and I think it got you to a next level in the interview. Right. I don't think that this particular thing is going to automatically stamp you out. You're golden. Let's go. Get your bag, get your hat. You're on the road tomorrow. I don't think that's the intent of it. I think it's more to help identify who are the right candidates and who are the people that are, have somewhat of a pulse as to what we're doing.
All right. Melissa, not only are you a good, you're Infocom, adjunct faculty, you're obviously Kramer trainer, but you're also heavily involved with AQAV. Let's get someone who's done training once or twice in her life. Your perspective on this.
Okay, so I don't think any of us have any EST training. Am I correct?
I do not know.
No. Okay. So NSCA has went down an interesting path, and what they're doing is they're going out to these ITT techs and these types of colleges, and they're putting in their training program, which is part of that EST and different levels of it, et cetera. I applaud them for doing that. I think that's awesome. I think if you look at their training program, it is very hands-on. So they actually set up racks and walls and rooms, and you actually have to do the hands-on component. And that's one of the big complaints that we've heard about some other trainings is there's no hands-on aspect to it. So I think they've made great strides in doing that. I'm a little nervous about this particular assessment tool. I worry when they say that it can help you find extraordinary talent. Okay, look, it's 18 sections with no more than, I think, like 20 questions. That does not give you an extraordinary talent. But it's at least something. To me, it's reminiscent of the old CTS prep course or CTS test that we had when it was online or, online at your computer. It's at least a tool. I like their training programs. I like what I see coming out of their training programs. I think they're a little more focused in life safety than AV, but I would be interested to work with them and see, where they're at on the AV side of it, and certainly offer any help. But it's an interesting approach. So,
did you hear that, Chuck? Call Melissa. That's what she's saying.
Call Melissa. That's right.
Call Melissa, Chuck. Chuck Wilson is the head of NSCA, if you didn't know that. Mr. Cordell, when it comes to not only you and your own personal growth, but also as someone who helps run M3, how do you see this test?
I agree with Melissa. It's commendable that they're putting something out there, and I do all of the technical hiring for our Nashville branch and our Memphis branch and our Huntsville branch. But I'm used to greenhorns. Give me a guy with a good attitude who's willing to learn, probably who moved to Nashville to be a musician and it didn't work out, and we'll turn them into an AV pro. That's kind of what we do. And so I don't expect most of the people that I hire on to have that level of knowledge. So the assessment would probably just already tell me what hopefully they're already being honest with me about. I don't have a lot of experience in most of these areas, but I'm willing to learn. Yeah. Those are the people that I'm looking for in general anyway. I think maybe for a bigger firm, maybe for your Whitlocks or somebody where you're, bringing on maybe guys that came over from other competing large firms that, are talking smack about how awesome they are. Sure. You know what? Why don't you sit down for a couple hours? Let's take this test and let's see, let's just see where you're at. And to me, that would make a ton of sense especially when you're dealing with manpower on that scale. But, for the smaller mom and pop firms, there's nothing a good conversation can't figure out, and I do pop in those not by no means are they gotcha questions, but just kind of probing questions that give me an understanding of what the potential new hire knows, about what we do. I get tons of audio engineers. It's like, cool, can you hang these speakers?
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing is I've talked with George Tucker, big part of AVNation. He used to work for a manufacturer, and one of his main jobs was hiring some of their technical folks. And, there are folks who simply don't take tests well, flat out, right? But he would sit them down and make them solder an XLR connector, right? There's a difference between the practical and the standardized testing, right? Where here's a box with some gazintas and some gazoutas, right? Make it connect to that thing over there. And as long as you can do that, maybe some of your standardized testing isn't so hot, but maybe you offset it with some of that hands-on stuff to make sure that you really do know what you're doing. Because I know folks who are book smart, who have no business being in a rack, right? who couldn't wire, it's the whole, AV nightmares on Facebook story where the wire is everywhere and it's a rat's nest and you don't want them touching things. So,
well, soldering, I think connectors right now, Tim, or making somebody solder a connector would probably be considered hazing at this point.
Oh, be quiet.
We still solder.
We still
do it.
Still gotta solder.
I do like the
asking a
hands-on
new hire
aspect
to
of what
roll
they're
up your
doing.
sleeves and drop some solder. That may be some. that may be considered.
No. There's the thing now. You can cold solder. Haven't you seen this thing? It's a little battery operated. Never mind. It's stupid.
Yeah.
Don't buy it. All right, that's going to do it for this week, kids. Mr. Chris Netto, thanks for hanging out with me for a couple days in New York.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. It was fun.
It was fun. How can people get a hold of you?
You can get a hold of me at @_Chris Netto. You can find me there on the Twitters and my company, avhelpdesk.com. That's the consultant company I work for. You can also find me on AV Hashtags. I'm part of the team that rolls that out on a weekly basis. And that's it.
That's it. All right.
Maybe more.
Okay.
Whatever.
Also with us is Miss Melissa Dillman from Kramer. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
And how can people get a hold of you?
Oh, you can find me all over the Kramer training page. You can find me at Melissa Dillman on Twitter, or mdillman@kramerus.com.
All right, very good. And last but not least, Mr. Phil Cordell, Hi-Fi, who has some brand spanking new shows coming out for AVNation.
At last.
He and his cohort, Mr. Matt Scott, they decided to have a baby.
Not together.
Not together.
Not that there's anything wrong with that.
Not that there's anything wrong with that. But he and Matt separately, their wives, decided that it was time to procreate for some reason with these gentlemen. So both of them had babies in February, and so they've taken some time off from the AV App show. So they have some new ones coming out this month. So pay attention and stay tuned for that. But how else can people get a hold of you, sir?
Yeah, man, you can find me on Twitter at @the_AV_pro. Find me on my website, theavprofessional.com, or find me on YouTube, youtube.com/highfidelity, HIPHIDELITY. And I also have to add, I don't know who's watching this show that hasn't seen the live from New York show that you guys did, but it was awesome. Made me feel like a teenager all over again watching 3 Carson Dailies, TRL.
Wow.
Yeah, from
Holy
Times Square.
cow.
It was special. It was a special moment.
We were apparently like
outside the
2 blocks away from that very location there, Phil. Now the studio's no longer there. It's like there's actually digital signage covering up where Carson Daly did TSL, right? But yeah, we're like a block and a half away from the Viacom CBS studios. So yeah, it was kind of neat. So
Cool, man.
Don't kid yourself. Every time Tim walked over to the window, the crowd went nuts outside.
Stackhouse and dragging everybody up there. Woo! All the AV tweeps.
60-year-old guys went nuts. All right. My name is Tom Albright. Don't follow me at this point. I'm still convincing about the Bears season, but go by the website if you would, please. AVNation.tv. AVNation.tv. You'll find this very program, Phil's program, a program that Mr. Netto did from a comic book shop owned by Jay and Silent Bob. So that was kind of neat. You'll see us live from the Times Square. Sign up for our newsletter if you would, please. We're starting to roll that out slowly but surely. Doing some new things with that this month, and some new writers, some new voices coming to AVNation here in the not too distant future. So AVNation.tv, AVNation.tv. Thanks so much for watching. Thanks so much for listening. This has been AV Week.